And so, yeah, there are a lot of arguments for pay for performance, obviously. I think that's kind of the status quo. I teach a class in reward systems. I'm doing it now. We'll start tomorrow with this topic in particular. I'm going to not talk about the dark side much. I'm going to talk about the upside to it. It's going to spend Thursday, Saturday, and so forth talking about how to construct a good strategic pay for performance system. But I think it's important to understand it's a very hard tool to use. I would argue anyway, it's the hardest management tool to use to motivate employees. It has an upside and a downside. It's a double-edged sword. So what I'm going to do tonight, since I'm guessing most of you in the room already kind of are aware of the upsides, is try to make you aware of the downsides, at least some of the downsides. So yeah, we did a study in an organization, and it was a good opportunity. They were implementing merit pay for performance. Never had done it before, paid across the board. Before the new plan was announced, we surveyed the employees and asked them all kinds of questions, including about how motivated they were on the job and so on and so on and so forth. We waited till the new system had been in effect a while, and we surveyed them again. This was several months later, actually more like a year, something plus later. And sure enough, yeah, their intrinsic motivation went down, and it went down most, by far, for those who didn't feel the merit pay system was fair, which were a lot of them, actually, unfortunately. Okay. So this organization found itself, after the implementation of merit pay, in a substantial amount of money it cost, with less motivation than they had to begin with. Okay, so that's one downside. The loss of intrinsic motivation and the difficulty of maintaining extrinsic motivation. A second one, pay for performance may not be good for employee well-being. All we ever seem to talk about is organizational performance. And okay, I understand, it's a business, you got to make money. But I also teach ethics as well as I teach human resource management. And I also like to bring to people's attention that employee well-being is a very important outcome in and of itself. Okay, but now stick with me for just a second, okay? Pay for performance relies on employee materialism to be effective. What is employee materialism? Materialism is a value. Materialism can be defined as placing a high value on income, money, and possessions. It's very simple in that way. You may have heard the term before. Materialism. Okay. All right. Now, for pay for performance to be effective, employee has to place a high value on money. Research supports that. Okay, and it's kind of common sense, I think, too. Employees don't care that nobody doesn't care about money, right? It's a matter of degree, right? Some employees don't care as much about money as others, though. Depends on the occupation and so forth. But anyway, it relies on employee materialism to be effective. My research shows that materialistic employees on average have lower job satisfaction, lower career satisfaction, increased work-family conflict, both for men and women in the workforce. This was one of our more surprising findings. To be honest, I didn't expect to find that. Research in the non-work setting has shown dozens and dozens of studies have shown that materialism affects life satisfaction. Okay, so we weren't surprised at finding the first two at all. That's just consistent with the non-work research. We were kind of surprised, at least I was, in finding the increased work-family conflict outcome, and then greater stress on the job. Now, that can be good or bad. That's another double-edged sword. Stress can be good. It can be something that keeps you on edge and keeps you working hard, and that's okay. But now I'm talking about employee well-being. And the stress we measured was the kind of stress that's not good for physical health and mental health. Okay, furthermore, I'm not done yet. Research and a lot of real-world evidence shows that pay for performance may cause unethical behavior. But I want to bring you in a sense up to date on some fairly recent research that's really targeted this kind of thing. First of all, there's evidence from neuroscience. What is neuroscience? First of all, I didn't conduct this research, but I think you might find it interesting. Neuroscience has been a boom to marketing research, I know. Maybe some research in other areas like finance in terms of decision making to monetary stimuli and so on and so forth. Well, here's basically what they found as it relates to pay. They found that pay activates the exact same areas of the brain as does cocaine and other addictive substances to almost the same level. So the dopamine system and so on and so forth, when they do magnetic resonance imaging, the brain on pay, so to speak, and how they, put the brain on pay, it's a long story, but the brain on pay looks exactly the same as the brain on cocaine and other very addictive drugs. And what's maybe more important is that the brain, when you take away the pay, looks very much like the brain when you take away the addictive substance like cocaine. The heart rate goes up. Paranoia goes up, so negative thought patterns start occurring, and poor decision making. Poor decision making. Dumb choices. And we all hear stories of addicts making stupid choices when they're looking for another hit of the drug, I guess you could say. I'm not saying it's exactly the same thing, okay, but some of the same brain imaging happened, and it did surprise the scientists who conducted this research. And I can point you to an article that discusses this, so afterwards let me know that article. Now, research that I've done has found that on average, materialistic employees are more deviant in the workplace. What I mean by deviant is specifically related to coworkers, doing things that are considered inappropriate in the context of a particular culture or society. And I emphasize coworkers because materialistic employees are not more deviant with respect to organizations. They don't do things that hurt the organization, probably because it may affect their pay, but they do things that affect their coworkers. It wasn't, in terms of who we sampled here, who we surveyed, it was coworkers, not the employees themselves, of course. Materialistic employees are less likely to be good company citizens. What's a good company citizen? The one that goes above and beyond the call of behavior. We all know somebody like that in our workplace. The one that always seems to go the extra mile for whatever's happening, even if he or she doesn't think they're going to get rewarded for it. They do it anyway. They're the ones who do things when nobody's looking to the benefit of the organization. And research shows that materialistic employees are far less likely to engage in those behaviors. And finally, materialistic employees have more negative attitudes about corporate social responsibility. That was in the third study. So these are three different, I'm sorry, the first two are the one study, the third one is the second study that we did. So it comes out all kind of depressing, in some ways very depressing. Materialism and pay for performance in general can have negative effects on both motivation, well-being, and ethical behavior. Okay, solutions. Well, one of those professors that always likes to talk about the problem, never how to fix it, right? But there are solutions, and it just isn't what I wanted to make the focus of this talk. But maybe if I come back next year, we can have the solutions part of it. But what it kind of boils down to is that nobody's saying don't pay well. Pay as well as you can. And research confirms that that's good, obviously. Pay fairly. How do you do that? Well, that's hard. Pay fairly. It's easy to say, but it's hard to do. Use practices other than pay to motivate employees. And again, I like to think of it as a toolkit or a toolbox. You have a lot of things there at your disposal if you're in HR. Pay is one of them, but maybe that should be the last one to turn to, not the first one to turn to. And then finally, most importantly, get pay off people's minds. And maybe what you're thinking is, but you start out by saying that people think it's just to pay for performance. And then if you don't pay for performance, it's going to be on people's minds. And I agree. So what we argue is that what you do is you want to pay for performance only as much as is necessary to satisfy employee justice concerns, but never any more.